Hi, and this is Helen Thomas from the CDFM study group. All right, I want to provide some visuals now of the 2018 study guide for CDFM Module 2.2. So I'm going to look at the DoD acquisition life cycle. All right, so remember the Department of Defense have three support systems. They have JCIDS, Joint Capabilities Integration and Development System, PPBE, Planning, Programming, Budgeting, and Execution, and the Defense Acquisition System. So those are the three resource management systems that the DoD use to help to make decisions. So before we can get into the acquisition life cycle, we need to understand what the JCIDS system provides. We already talked about the PPBE process for resourcing and asking for funding from Congress. Now we need to look at how the Defense Acquisition System works. The Joint Capabilities Integration and Development System is run or organized by the Vice Chairman of the Joint Chief of Staff, if you remember from our PPBE lessons. So the JCIDS, the executor is the Vice Chairman of the Joint Chief of Staff, and the Vice Chairman of the Joint Chief of Staff sits as the Chairman of the Joint Requirements Oversight Council. All this is a board or a council of individuals that sit down, and what they do is they try to identify capability gaps. Once we identify or we know what our strategy needs to be for the military or the Department of Defense, then the JCIDS process is used to analyze. It's a system of a lot of analytical processes that is used to identify capability gaps. So what do they look at? They look at, and if you work in trade-op, you'll hear the term .mlpf. So what the JCIDS or the JROC Council does with the Vice Chairman of the Joint Chief of Staff is they analyze the doctrine, organization, training, material, leadership education, personnel, and facilities. Those are all the key areas in which they can affect change. So once they identify what is needed in the strategy, the national security strategy, national defense strategy, national military strategy, then what are our capability gaps? What things do we not have in our inventory that we may need to develop? Once they analyze the .mlpf, if the recommended solution to fill that gap is a material, which is this guy right here, a material solution, then that is what triggers the Defense Acquisition System. So I just wanted to make sure you understand. And as I mentioned, these things overlap, the JCIDS, PPBE, and the Defense Acquisition System. So if it's not just money or we just need more personnel, we need more training, we need better facilities, and it's something we need to develop, material, then the material solution triggers the acquisition process. So the JROC then creates an initial capabilities document. That is a document that says, hey, we have a capability gap, and here are the requirements of that we need that item to do. So the ICD is that initial capabilities document that is created to list all the requirements and associated estimated costs for that system. So understand that the DoD Acquisition Management System is an evolutionary. They don't always have to start from the beginning. It can also be a single step process. If we already have technology existing out there and we can tie into those technology, it may be a one-step process, or it may be something where it has to be research and develop, an evolutionary. So the JROC reviews this whole acquisition system. So JROC in charge of JCIDS, but they also review the Defense Acquisition System. We got to make sure everything stay in line, hence the overlap. So there are 3 milestones and 5 phases that we're going to discuss. All right, so phase one is the material solution analysis. Now we receive the ICD, same guy here, that tells us what we need, and we go into our first phase. So it says the purpose of this phase is to conduct analysis and other activities to choose the concept of the product. We need to have detailed information on the requirements, the concept, the structure, the maintenance of this product that we need to develop. So you translate that capability gap up here into key requirements, which include key performance parameters. What does it need to do? What type of attributes, key system attributes, does this system need to have? And what are our courses of action? Analysis of the alternative. We need different alternatives, so we need to evaluate. Like when you do a course of action analysis, is you're trying to analyze which one will make the right sense for us to buy. So key trade-offs, we want to look at schedule. How long is it going to take? What does it do? What are the risks associated with it? How much does it cost? And are we able to mitigate those risks once we do the risk analysis? So the material solution analysis, phase one, will tell us everything that we need to develop that item. Milestone A. Remember, there's a decision that has to be made by the milestone decision authority. So a favorable milestone A decision approves program entry into the next phase. You have to have a review or decision point after each. We don't want to develop a whole item to then find out, oh, this does not fill the capability gap we talk about up here. So before and after each phase or decision point is made to decide whether we continue or not. So a favorable milestone A approves program entry into the next phase, the technology maturation and risk reduction. This term is different than what was in the 2013 study guide. So in case you decide, hey, I'm not going to buy the 2018, understand that some of the terms have changed. And the release of the final request for proposals. That's when we start asking for contracts. So we need to make sure that we know exactly, material solution analysis tells us exactly what this material needs to do. And then we need to have an approval process by the milestone decision authority about what we need to request in the contract to be conducted in the next phase. So component responsible, Army, Navy, Air Force, who's responsible, will show that program is fully funded. We got to have money. Make sure that money is accounted for in our POM process. So that in the future year defense program, all right, check on learning. Who is responsible for updating the FIDEP, future year defense program? The DoD database. The director of CAPE, that's correct, DCAPE, at milestone A. So a favorable milestone A does not equal program initiation. So just because the milestone decision authority says go ahead and proceed to the next phase, it does not mean a full-fledged acquisition process has begun. We're still in the developmental stage here. So technology maturation and risk reduction. You see I put the phases in purple, the milestones in green, so you can see the difference. Entry into this phase begins after a successful milestone A, which is right here, decision review. The purpose, make sure you know the purpose of each. So I kind of started off each one. So material solution analysis, the purpose is to conduct analysis of the activities to choose the concept of the product. Technology maturation and risk reduction phase. Entry into this phase begins after successful, but the purpose of the phase is to reduce technology, engineering, and life cycle cost risk before we go into a full-fledged acquisition development process in the engineering phase. We need to reduce the risk in this phase. So that's the purpose of this technology maturation and risk reduction. Prototypes are encouraged before, again, we go into the engineer, manufacturing, development phase. So in this part of it, we're developing prototypes. Development of the request for proposals, release decision point done to ensure executable, affordable program has been planned using sound business and technical approach. So again, before we actually go into a contract, we need to make sure we know what we are asking for. Milestone B. Favorable milestone B approves entry into the next phase, engineer manufacturing development, and responsible component to award EMD contract. Milestone B, keyword here, is the formal initiation of the acquisition program with milestone decision authority approval of the acquisition program baseline. So this is the same program baseline that is established by the program manager. So if it says which part of this acquisition management system begins the formal part, once we go to milestone B and it's approved, that means we have committed to the development of this capability gap. So milestone B is the formal initiation of the acquisition program. It also gives finalized the low rate initial production. So when we first start developing these things, we don't want to develop the whole fleet to find out it's not doing what we want it to do. So we've established in the beginning a number. What's the low rate initial? What are we going to create initially to push out to the field, to test it, to make sure it's doing what we said it will do to fill the capability gap up here. So MDE decision, so that actually should be milestone decision authority decision documented in an acquisition decision memorandum, the ADM. And actually, let me go ahead and correct that. EMD, milestone decision authority, right? I don't want you to have the wrong information. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. Then we'll go back to where we were. All right, now we're back on point. All right, so the next phase, third phase, is engineering and manufacturing development. Entry into this point begins after a successful milestone B. So you see, before we go to any milestone, any phase, actually before we go to any phase, there is a decision point that the milestone decision authority have to say, yes, proceed. Purpose of this phase, again, know the purpose of the phase, is to develop, build, and test the product to ensure all requirements have been met. Oh, there's another MDE may authorize. Let me fix it. Stay with me. Because again, I don't want to publish this and then it's the wrong information. So I could do it and restart, but I want you to see this is a growing process. And you can learn with me. All right, so let's go back. Reverse. Let me go back to previous. All right, so engineering. So development, testing, and evaluation is conducted at this phase, the EMD phase. It provides feedback to the program manager on progress of the design, evaluates the system ability to achieve the key performance parameters that we set and the key system attributes that we identified here in the material solution analysis phase. Early operational assessments are conducted. So this pretty much is your bread and butter of the development when it's a full-fledged development. Remember, we're only focused on that low rate initial production. Milestone C and limited deployment decision points. This is where the program is reviewed for entry into the final phase of production and deployment. So decision at milestone C and limited deployment decisions are documented again in the ADM, acquisition, which is right here, acquisition decision memorandum, following the review. The final phase is the production and deployment. Entry into this point occurs with a successful milestone C decision review. Once they agree with whatever happens here, then he says go ahead to production. Purpose of this phase is to achieve operational capability that satisfy the mission needs. Operation test and evaluation conducted to determine the effectiveness and suitability. Milestone Decision Authority commits the DoD to production. Now we're committing to the full production, actually not full rate. We are committing to development of, here we go, low rate initial production, the LRIP. Now we start producing that low rate. We don't want the full rate, because what it says here is conduct full rate production review, and successful review initiates full production. Achieves initial operational capability at the production and deployment phase, which is a specific date the capability is to be achieved. So the IOC is a date that says that our capability will be ready for distribution into the field. The full rate production decision or full deployment decision point. This is just a decision point. It is neither a phase or a milestone. So as you see here, although this is not a phase, it is extremely important. The Milestone Decision Authority reviews that operation, test, and evaluation. We test it, we evaluate it, make sure it's doing what it's supposed to do, initial manufacturing, and determine if it meets all the needs and all our requirements. And the final phase is operations and support. Purpose is to execute. So after we've established our low rate initial production, we've done the review for full rate. The purpose is to execute the product strategy and sustain life cycle. Now we have to sustain. So there are two major things, major efforts within the operation and support: sustainment and disposal. Remember, cradle, beginning, to grave, disposal. Life cycle support plan that was prepared in the beginning, prepared by the program manager and approved by the Milestone Decision Authority. The program achieves fully operational capability, FOC, when total quantity is delivered to the warfighter. So the end of the life cycle of that system is when that system is demilitarized. Whatever the SOP or regulatory guidance says, to destroy that system, to take away that capability and dispose of that item, ends the life cycle of that item. All right, so hopefully that made it a little bit better to understand the DoD acquisition life cycle. All right, so next, I'm going to just go over the DoD acquisition categories. Acquisition category 1, Roman numeral 1, is a major defense acquisition program. So whenever you hear ACAT 1, that tells you it's a major defense acquisition program. Nothing to do with technology or information systems. There are two subcategories of ACAT 1. ACAT 1 Delta, and the D behind it tells you it's a DoD level program. So the Milestone Decision Authority for ACAT 1 Delta programs is the USD ATNL, Undersecretary of Defense Acquisition Technology and Logistics. That individual is also called the Defense Acquisition Executive. Just like we all have different titles, the USD ATNL is the DAE. He is also the chairman of the Defense Acquisition Board, and he advises, because that board advises him, and he also participates in the Joint Requirements Oversight Council reviews. ACAT 1 Charlie, the C means component level. Just like when you have certain things that your commander will handle, your higher command will handle, and certain things that you will handle at your level or your supervisor will handle. So the DoD level is ACAT 1 Delta, acquisition category 1 Charlie, C being component. That's how you can tell the difference. So the Milestone Decision Authority at the component level is the Component Acquisition Executive, whoever that individual is. The second category of major programs is ACAT 1 Alpha. Is a major automated, so the A behind it will tell you it's Automated Information System, MAIS. ACAT 1 AM and ACAT 1 AC. Unfortunately, this ACAT 1 AM doesn't have the D behind it, but when you see it, ACAT 1 AM is the DoD level, and 1 AC is still the component level. So DoD, only difference here is because we're dealing with technology information system, is the USD AT&L may designate the CIO, Chief Information Officer, to be in charge and be the Milestone Decision Authority, MDA, for ACAT 1 AM programs. Same thing as above. So that's the difference there. Component acquisition executive is the senior acquisition person at that level. So it's different for Army, Navy, Air Force, whatever, whoever that senior acquisition person is their component acquisition executive. There are two exceptions. SOCOM and DLA have been given their own acquisition responsibility. So they do not have to fall under the Army or the Navy or so forth. They have their own acquisition executive. That's the exception to the rule. All right, what are our life cycle cost compositions? So the life cycle cost categories: research and development, investment, operations and support, and disposal. So remember, we talk about life cycle from cradle to grave. There's different colors of money that is used to do each one of those processes. So that's what we're talking about here. The first cost you will talk about is development cost. And make sure you're going to have to know the difference. When I say development costs, you're going to have to know, okay, all my RDT&E funds. If I have several of them, I have to add up all my RDT&E money that is used for my development costs. So in a life cycle composition, your milestone decision authority will say, well, how much is the development cost? Okay, add up all your RDT&E and that will give you your development. The next is flyaway. I'm developing a system, now I need to take off. Flyaway cost is procurement of the prime equipment only. Flyaway is procurement. So whenever you're going to have to do practical exercises, and I think I have one at the end here so you can see, is procurement of the prime item. So when you hear flyaway, you need to remember that. The third is weapon system costs. Weapon system cost includes this flyaway cost, prime item, and procurement of support items. So two procurement costs associated with the weapon system cost: flyaway, which is procurement of the prime equipment, and procurement of support items. The fourth is your procurement cost. That just means you add up all your procurement costs, your flyaway, your weapon system, and procurement of initial spares. All your procurement costs added up together will give you this value. Milcon costs, if you got a facility, military construction dollars, add them up, that's your Milcon costs. All of these together make up your program acquisition costs, your PAC. That is your RDT&E, procurement, and Milcon. When you add them all up, because you will have values in the practical exercises, when you add RDT&E, procurement, and Milcon, the total is your program acquisition costs. Then you add operations and support costs, O&M, and MilPers. So if in your list and it says, give me your operation and support costs, you got to add up your O&M dollars and your MilPers to get your operation and support costs. And then your disposal costs. I gotta demilitarize and dispose of that item. I need O&M, or if some other dollar is designated, but for the most part, we use O&M dollars to dispose. All the costs together make up a life cycle cost. So that includes the program acquisition costs, all of these, 1 through 5, operations and support and disposal, everything makes up the cost, the life cycle cost of that material solution. All right, hopefully that made it a little bit easier to understand and not worse. All right, let's see what's next. So I have some formulas at the bottom because you're going, as mentioned, you're going to have to calculate the program acquisition unit cost. So up here is the program acquisition cost, RDT&E, procurement, and Milcon. And then if they say they want to know how much is one, unit means one. I know how much the total is. I need to know how much for one. So it says I add up my RDT&E, Milcon, and procurement divided by the number of units that I have. Remember, these are usable end items. Once I'm done development, usable end items, number of units, and that will give me my unit cost. Calculate average procurement unit cost. We have our procurement costs here for number 4. That means everything that had the word procurement, and anything that was purchased, any unit that was purchased with procurement dollars, I divide by that unit, and that will give me my average procurement unit cost. And I do have some examples that I'm going to go over shortly. All right, so let's go over the exercises. Exercise 221, life cycle cost, to kind of show you, put those things into action. The example given, it gives you total RDT&E. So what they did for you is they add up all the RDT&E already. But in your actual exercise, when you do the test, you may have several RDT&E dollars listed. And you have to know, I need to total all of this to give the development cost, for example. All right, so prime missions, equipment, procurement, 600 million. Support items, procurement, 50 million. Initial spares procurement, 50. Milcon, 100 million. O&M, 740 million. Milpers, 460 million. So, all right, so you're required to fill in the blanks below. So let me go. Development costs, flyaway costs, weapon system costs, procurement costs, program acquisition costs, operations and support costs, and your total life cycle cost. So what is the development cost? We said development cost is my total RDT&E. Total RDT&E is given already for 400 million. Flyaway cost. So I have to know the definition of flyaway. Flyaway cost is procurement of my prime equipment. So prime mission equipment procurement, and trust me, it's not going to be this easy on the test. You're going to have to sift through all of it to pull out the information. But the key word you're looking for is prime equipment, 600 million. Weapon system cost, I said, was the prime plus the support. Flyaway cost, which is this guy, 600, plus the support of 50 is 650. That's my weapon system cost. Procurement cost, I said, was adding up all my procurement. So this one has the word procurement. That's 600. That's 50. That's 650. That is, another 50 is 700 million. That's my procurement cost. All my procurement dollars. Program acquisition costs. Remember the first square. Program acquisition cost and definition is when I add up all my RDT&E, all my procurement, all my military constructions. So when I add up the 4, the 6, the 5, 50, the 50, and the 100, I get 1,200 million. All RDT&E plus all procurement plus all MilCon. And I'm putting this all because it's not going to always be so nicely separated for you. It's going to have several MilCon, several RDT&E, and you see the several procurement listed there. All right, so what makes up my operations and support? I said was my operation and support is my O&M and my MilPer. So I need to add these two numbers, the 740 and the 460, and we get another 1,200 million. And my life cycle cost is adding up everything, and that comes to 2,400 million. Total cost of everything. So in saying for the life cycle of this development, this acquisition project, it's going to cost $2,400 million. Cool, right? So remember these total, because you will use these same numbers now for exercise 222, average unit cost. Now you need to calculate. So it says use the data from exercise 221, the one we just did, after being used for developmental test and evaluation purposes. 3 fully configured units. That's what we're looking for. They have to be fully configured. Units of weapon system were acquired with RDT&E money. So we got 3 that we developed with RDT&E money. The second one says there are 297 fully configured end items procured with procurement funds. So I have 297 fully configured end items that I paid for with procurement dollars. It makes a difference. 3 with RDT&E, 297 with procurement. And I'll show you why it makes a difference in a little bit. All right, so let's do the first one. So the first one, I got to calculate the program acquisition unit cost. So I already know the program acquisition cost because I did the PAC on the first one. And the program acquisition unit cost now is calculated as such. My program acquisition cost was 1,200 million. I divide that by 300 fully configured. Why? Because program acquisition cost includes RDT&E, procurement, and MilCon. We don't have any MilCon fully configured items. So that's why I took this 297, 298, 299, 300, add these 3 to get 300 fully configured end items. So the 1,200 divided by 300 fully configured items give me 4 million. That's your PAUC. And then to calculate or compute the average procurement unit cost. Remember, procurement cost is adding up all my procurement, anything related with procurement only. So from the previous exercise, the procurement cost was 700 million. I only have 297 fully configured items that were purchased with procurement funds. So 297 divided into that 700 million will give us 2.357 as our average procurement unit cost. All right. Unit cost in labor hours. Given the below information, determine the unit cost expressed in labor hours with a learning curve of 90%. So I'm doing exercise 223. So what's given, the unit number and the labor hours. So remember, learning curve is how much it takes, how many hours it should take to double the workload. The more you do a job, you should get better at it, and I should be able to double my workload in a certain percentage. So the learning curve for this one is 90%. So let's go through all the units. So to double from 1 to 2, 2 to 4, 4 to 8, and 8 to 16. It asks you to fill in the 8 and the 16 units. So it will take, so what this is saying, it will take 153.9 hours to make unit number 4. From unit 4 to Unit 8, you take that 153.9, multiply times the 90% when you convert it to decimal is 0.90, and it'll give you 138.5. And then you take that 138.5 times the learning curve of 90%, 138.5 times 0.90 will give you 124.7 for the 16th unit. So you may be asked, all right, calculate how much labor hours it will take to create the 16th unit. So you have to go through each one of those. So the learning curve percentage is given in this exercise, 90%. And that's how so 90% from each level. Then the other way, it might ask you for the learning curve percentage. Remember, on the exam, you are not allowed to use a calculator or phone. You got to use a pencil and an eraser and a blank sheet of paper. So how do I do that with these big numbers? You're like me, you might forget how to do long-handed division. So I take a shortcut. All right. So what you should do if you don't know what the percentage is you should be able to take. So percentage always comes from a small number divided by a larger number. That's one. The second thing is if you actually do the long division, 595 divided by the 700 should give you 0.85. Or if you do 505.8 divided by 595, you should get all your learning curve percentage should always be the same if you're in the same unit development. And then to check your answer, you do 700.0 times 85% or 0.85 should give you the next value. And the same way, likewise, if I do 595 times 0.85, I should get the next value. Now, what the shortcut that I was saying, let me go ahead and fill these in. The shortcut I was saying on the exam, let's say they give you 4 choices. Let's say they say 65, 75, 85, 95. You're like, which one is the learning curve? Oh my God, I don't know. All you got to do is do 700 times 65. Do you get this number? Nope. 700 times 75. Do you get 595? Nope. Go to the next one. 700 times 85. Do you get 595? Yep. Must be 85. And then you check your answers. You fill in the rest of these columns. You check. If you multiply 505.8 times 85, you should get 429.9. So that's my shortcut tip. If you don't remember how to do long division like this guy over here, of course, yes, I use a calculator. But what I do, if I'm taking a test and I'm not confident in my long division skills, I'll look at the responses that they give and then I'll test the answer. So I'll take all 4 choices and I know if I multiply the learning curve times the labor hours, it should give me the next labor hour to double. So I'll just do it like that. So if you have any questions, if I'm not explaining this one, please leave a note under the video and I will definitely answer it because I'm sure others may have the same question. So the key here is your learning curve percentage is always the same when you're talking about doubling units, and your labor hours should get less. All right, and I want to finish off with the earned value management because people get confused here. So earned value, remember this is the system or process that is used between the government and the contractor to measure the quality of the work. Am I getting what I paid for? So this is part of the process with your contracting officer representative and so forth. So a couple of things that is compared. Your budgeted cost of work schedule. That means planned work. I plan to pay $487 to do this job. You have 2 types of variance. Variance just means the difference between what I planned versus what actually happened. So you have schedule variance and cost variance. So I'm looking at how long it takes in dollars and what it actually costs in dollars. So let's do it separate. So like I mentioned when I did the slide itself, I talked about having two separate charts here. So really we look at this half. You see the formulas. It says schedule variance is the middle guy here, budgeted cost of work performed minus budgeted cost of work schedule will give me schedule variance. So what's the schedule variance for 487? I plan to pay 487. The value of the work, not the cost of the work, but the value of the work, budgeted cost of work performed is the value is equal to exactly what I planned. So the difference is 0, so it's on target. That's on point. Schedule variance on point. Let's do project B. Budgeted cost, I plan to pay $250. And when they were done, the value of the work was only $217. But that's not good. The difference is a negative $33, which is unfavorable. I want the value. Just you think about if you put an addition on your house, you expect the value of your home to go up, not down. So if it was valued at $250 when I planned it, and now your value is only $217, the difference, BCWP minus BCWS, is a negative 33, which is unfavorable. So when you sit down with a contractor, you're like, hey, what's going on? It's unfavorable. Next is, I plan to spend $719, but when the work was done, the value of the work done was $847. Is that good or bad? That is actually good. Right? You want the value to be when the project is done and you got that extension on your home, I want the value of my home to go up. So schedule variance, the difference between both is 128, and that becomes favorable because its value is more than what I planned. All right, let's look at cost variance now. We're looking at actual costs here. So cost variance is the budgeted cost of work performed, the value of the work versus how much I actually had to pay, actual cost. So the first one says the value is $487. I actually paid $487, so $0 on target. The value was $217. But I only paid $122. Is that favorable or unfavorable? Well, if it's valued more than what I paid, it's favorable. Yes, $95, favorable. If the value of the work done is $847 and I actually paid $875, then that means it's unfavorable by $28. I paid $28 more than what the item was valued for. So that's how it's best for you to learn how to set up the earned value management chart like this, even if you have to recreate it on your blank sheet of paper, because then you can compare the values with each other that way. All right, so that's earned value managed, schedule variance versus cost variance, and whether it's on target, favorable, or unfavorable. Thank you, and I'll see you guys again next time. Be sure to subscribe so you'll get the updates.